JeffreyCharest, and last fall, Westland Resources conducted data recovery at a site in Sahuarita, Arizona. It's about half an hour south of Tucson. It's in the middle Santa Cruz River Valley. The area south of Tucson, all the way down to Tudot along the river, is the middle Santa Cruz. And this area, I asked when I put on the project, well, what is the site? Oh, well, it's ring hunt phase. So we assume it's Hohokam. And then as we started to excavate, started to do more research, saying, well, maybe it's really not all that Hohokam. The site lies next to an active adult community, which sounds really naughty, but it isn't. They play golf. And people that live there would come by the site every day. And, what are you doing? What is this? This is so fascinating. And we tell them what we're about. And they say, well, what culture is it? If they had just enough archaeological savvy, they visited Casa Grande or some sites, and they did a little reading. I said, well, what culture is it? I said, well, I don't know. I said, it's not Hohokam? Not exactly. So we dug 11 pit structures, and they were not spectacular. They were all structures and pits, no plaster or adobe preparation of the floors. Some of the hearths had plaster, but they were very poorly preserved. Artifact density was low throughout, and most of the structures that had been filled with trash had less than 200 artifacts per square meter. There are a number of sites in the Sahuarita area called the Sahuarita Group. There's about 60 sites from the middle Santa Cruz, the middle Rincon phase. Those sites tend to cluster around that era, but this site was particularly occupied for a particularly short period of time, whereas the others had a much longer occupation. The site had a high number of locally made ceramics. Much of the ceramics were not introduced. We had 8 sherds from the Middle Gila, from the Hohokam core areas. So if the Gila and Salt Rivers are the Hohokam core area, and Tucson is a periphery, then what is the middle Santa Cruz? We had some slight Trincheras influence in some of the pottery, in terms of coil and hand modeling, scouring of the vessels with a fiber bundle, and a soft yellowish clay, but it's not a direct Trincheras influence. We believe that it was an after effect, sort of a lingering effect of interaction with Trincheras people. Because we're at the frontier between Trincheras and Hohokam, and the site has evidence that the occupants were neither. This is in a time between the decline of the Hohokam ball court system and the rise of the platform mound system. So we're seeing that the occupants were utilizing an a la carte sort of selective process for cultural attributes, picking what they liked from one or another without too much influence from an outside source. We're seeing this in the shell ceramic, the shell artifacts as well. There's very little. There's only 9 shell artifacts, and they're not participating in a wider shell trade network. Flakestone and groundstone artifacts were all locally made. The flakestone was very poorly produced, very expedient tools, only one complete projectile point, and we believe that was an heirloom point they picked up from somewhere. Groundstone manufacture seems to have taken place at the site with, again, all local materials. There was flakestone, there was no outside obsidian or sources from anywhere else. There were large groundstone blanks, for lack of a better word, and I've asked around. Jenny Adams couldn't give me any answer to what they might be other than a blank, but they're extremely heavy. If they are a blank, they must have been a metate blank. But if anyone has a better idea, it's large, shaped, pecked, rectangular blocks without any working on them. Tabular tools presented 10%, accounted for 10% of the groundstone artifacts, and we noticed a distribution of a separation between the tabular tools and the groundstone tools in the structures, indicating possibly some household organization of a separation of activities within the household groups. Subsistence was sparse at best. Our flotation samples were fairly barren, and those are the words of our analyst. But the corn, quinoams were present in small levels of agricultural products. But there was also evidence of sporadic foraging and gathering. Typically in Hohokam sites at this period, we see a lot of, where the hunting is involved, we see a lot of rabbit remains, and that's not the case here. Only 15% of the faunal remains were rabbit. 58% were ungulate, and some of those, the bones from those had been turned into bone rings, which was pretty interesting. We saw evidence that that was occurring at the site as well. Large bird, probably turkey, accounted for 24% of the faunal remains. So, I suppose, what does this mean in terms of, it's a very poor site in terms of the richness of its assemblage. Hopefully we can find a little bit more out of it than just that. The paucity of the assemblage tells us a lot about who people were, though. The site occupants participated in their own network, their own system, apart from the Hohokam system. And they were, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Okay.
Notes. In many ways, the Quail Crossing site resembles other Rincon phase sites in the Tucson Basin, but the artifact assemblage, faunal remains, macrobotanical samples reveal subtle differences. The word sparse occurs frequently throughout our entire investigations. Artifact densities were low, faunal and macrobotanicals were sparse. Yet this sparseness could provide a clue as to the nature of the site and its function. The ceramic types found at the site indicate that Quail Crossing had an early and middle Rincon phase occupation, and yet the low artifact density suggests the site may not have been continuous. From the seemingly discontinuous occupation of the site, coupled with low investment in architecture, one can infer that Quail Crossing exhibits traits of a disjunctive land use pattern. The site could also be said to simply have been occupied for a shorter period of time than the majority of surrounding sites. This will, in time, provide a better understanding of the region and interactions between the Hohokam and this community.